So thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. Everybody who's joining us um, from all over the place. I'm Rabbi Iggy of the Tshuva Center, which is, for those of you who don't know, we're of course a recovery um, spiritual community we're building in New York that focuses on helping people find their way, helping people sort of build their lives because of recovery and incarceration and all sorts of different elements sort of that are uh, unfortunately also at the forefront of what we're going through today. I'm joined today by two people who I admire a lot, and I'll introduce them in a second. And our aim for this is to be part of a conversation. Yesterday, we observed, like many people, sort of a day of silence, if you will, on social media to create more space for people of color's voices and their narratives and what they want to say. And that's still very important. And I think that's incredibly, uh, um, it's what we need right now to sort of to hear more voices that come from people of color and their experiences through what they're going through right now and in general. And one of the ways I wanted to do it is the only way that I know how to make things better, and that is to connect. That is to listen and to talk and to really understand each other and to be able to create space for people to tell their stories and to connect through those stories. Because at the end of the day, it is through our stories, our vulnerabilities, our experience of the human condition, our different experiences in America that we will go through this and learn from each other. So I wanted to be part of an ongoing movement and definitely part of the solution. And I invited two people sort of to talk to me today. And by no means is this the definite answer to things, or are we here to explain all the things or solve everything, but really here to start a conversation, which we're hoping is going to be a long-standing conversation, whether it is through a series of these or in general. So I encourage everybody and I expect everybody to be as open and honest. There are no silly questions, there are no stupid questions. This is a forum for us to be able to do so. We'll try and get to as many questions as possible through what people are talking, but the bulk of the conversation will be between me and Jeremy and Ben. So with me, like I said, is Ben Litchman, who is our creative director here at the Truva Center, and I'll let him tell about his narrative and his story and through the system and in general. And then we have Jeremy Poole, who is our director of counseling. He's in charge of our counseling program. And he's going to talk a little bit about his experience of all this. I'm saddened deeply by everything that's going on, but I am excited to be able to refer to all of this in a way that is much more connected, and that is the conversation and the connection. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Ben, for coming. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Why don't you say a couple words about each other, about yourselves, and we can sort of go from there. Ben, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Litchman. Thank you, Iggy. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This, means a lot to us at Tshuva Center. What's going on right now, the state of the nation, the state of the world. We are dealing with a system that is systematically oppressing people, systematically trying to mute voices, and we deal with primarily people who struggle with addictions, people who struggle with feeling less than, not seen, feeling that they don't matter. And at the root of it, drugs and drug addiction and everything that is within that world is at the core a social justice issue. And we take these matters very seriously. For me, I was lucky because I grew up in a place where it was extremely diverse, where we really didn't think about these types of things because it wasn't really in our face that often. You know, everybody was mixed in together. The one thing that stood out to me growing up, of course, was that where I'm from, there weren't a ton of Jews that were in the public school. And so that was like the one thing that I got ripped on, right? Was that I was the one Jewish kid and there was always Jewish jokes. And, you know, I worked at the pizzeria and you know, my Italian boss, you know, and it was in jest, but it was just constant. You know, he had every Jew joke in the book. And, but to me, it didn't make me feel any less than. I do remember feeling like a bit ashamed about being Jewish, but the one thing is that part of the privilege that I see in myself is that I can blend in, right? The first thing people think when they see me isn't always Jewish, rarely Jewish. People ask, "Oh, what are you?" And I'll say, "Take a guess." It's rarely, "Oh, you're a Jew." So I was able to blend in and I was able to be a part of whatever group I was with. But really it wasn't discussed and it didn't really matter. You know, we all hung together and it was inclusive and people were that's just the way it was. And it wasn't until I kind of started branching out and getting older and moving around the country that I started to just see blatant racism. And I started to see the way things were stacked against certain communities in our country and that there were marginalized groups of people that are treated unfairly. And of course, my story led into drug addiction and drug use. And with that came crime and a life of criminality. And the crimes that I committed, I've never spent any time in prison. Whereas people that I know that were people of color and people in these marginalized communities have spent a lot of time behind bars, behind the same things that I did or less. And I feel that it's a responsibility right here, right now in the state that we're in, and to be able to use this as a platform to understand that everybody needs to speak out. Everybody needs to be screaming from the rooftops and say, this is not okay. We are not going to stand for this. In our community, we believe that each person is seen and each person matters. And if there's one group of people within our community that are being singled out because of the color of their skin, because of their religion, because of their beliefs, we will not stand with that. We will not back that. And, you know, I sit here and I think about my experience and I think about Jeremy's experience and I think about what a polar opposite experience that he's had versus mine. And, you know, you think about it like, okay, you know, maybe it's certain circumstances. You know, I was just lucky that I was at the right place at the right time, or I had the right defense at the right time. But the fact is that it's not just Jeremy, right? It's everybody that looks like Jeremy that's treated in that way, that it's before they're even brought up on any charges, before anything is even said, people just walk up to their cars and see them and all of a sudden he's a threat because of the way that he looks. He's a threat because of the color of his skin. Whenever I've never been in my car and been pulled over and thought to myself, this is the way I'm going to die tonight. Right? The thoughts in my head are, shit, do I have any warrants out for my arrest? Shit, am I going to get a ticket? Am I going to have to pay this? Is my registration up to date? But never in my mind am I like, is this cop going to kill me right now? And I feel great responsibility to be here and speak up and to use my privilege as a white guy in this world to express my concern for what I see and for my concern for how people are being treated. And it can't continue. It can't go on this way. We need to do everything that we can to make sure that things change and that they change now, because this isn't something that's been going on for 5, 10 years, 50 years. It's been going on for too long, too fucking long. So I'm honored to be here and to be able to have my voice be heard in this. And I'm going to pass it on to Jeremy now, and I'm going to let him tell his story and tell you where he comes from. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Poole. And first off, I just want to thank you for the space and a conversation, which I think is needed in this country. My heart's been hurt for a long time because when you keep reliving a trauma that you know has been existing in this country, and if you look into the history of this country, has been around since the start of it. You know, less than 60 years ago, we still believed in separation for races, right? So it doesn't baffle me. I'm not dumbfounded by the results of George Floyd and countless others. The hope is that two things happen throughout this, and I'll give a little bit of my background. But what I see is two things happen through the pandemic. People were forced to sit with themselves and no longer had chances to avoid, no longer had chance to numb out to the day-to-day hustle that all of us go through to get to our jobs, to feed our kids, to take care of our future, to make sure that we're okay, right? Like everyone has been forced to sit within themselves and look at themselves. And there's nowhere to hide here. There's nowhere to hide here. It sickens me that human beings will take more time to videotape a man 8 minutes than stick up and help out. And there were all races there. It's not the white people. There was the black man in that video watching another black man die. And this is hard because, again, the fear that we have is relive trauma. It's constant trauma. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I am biracial. This is actually very tough for me to do because for the longest time, I didn't know where I stood with race at all. As a child, I grew up in an area that didn't promote, it wasn't a melting pot, but there was still kind of like the segregation idea. You had a black part of the community, you had a Mexican part of the community, you had a white part of the community. I grew up in Los Angeles, in the Valley. And yeah, so even from an early age, like just witnessing what I'd seen from the people that were out to protect and serve, my earliest remembrance of racism was watching my dad getting hauled away by white police officers because my mother's white, because there was a domestic disturbance call, because their voices were too loud in a part of town that they probably shouldn't have been raising their mixed babies in. But my parents did everything they could to give us different opportunities, and I still face discrimination off the way I look. It's quick to label somebody. Without bad, there is no good, right? But this is not how we can hold people, especially in the eyes of the law. People break the laws. It doesn't mean they're bad. There's so much movement in the reform this way, like, oh, let's reform prison. What happens to them when they get incarcerated, right? But we're forgetting to look at the pipeline that keeps sending us to prison. We're forgetting to look at the people that have life and death choices over a community that, if you ask an officer today, maybe not today, but before this was in the media the way it was, if you ask an officer today what part of the community, what part of your town is the bad part of town, I guarantee you're going to see people of high color, a lot of drug use, impoverished areas. This is where crime consists. But this is not a bad part of town. So yeah, again, the race thing was very confusing for me. I hid behind it. I was never black enough to be black. I was never white enough to be white. And growing up in a Mexican neighborhood, like, I just started to hide. My dad was from South America, so I would use every other dialect or island or try to hide. I was Puerto Rican. My dad's from Venezuela. He's a black from Brazil. And the truth is like my heritage goes very close to slavery, not grandfather. My dad's 81 years old. He was born in 1939. My grandfather, he died in 1913. So this touches me close. And just 3 generations away, this touches me. And the thing that it's hard, man. Like it is a tough conversation. It is a tough conversation to have with most people. But I promise you, you wouldn't trade a day for your life or mine, right? And we're all human beings, right? But there's something beautiful that I know is like finally getting the time to see myself as a full person. And this is the way I believe this is the way my community heals from a lot of this stuff. I didn't heal through the hate that I learned, because all the oppressive systems, they turned me into an individual that tried to get out of the oppression. And the way that I seen my dad do it wasn't good enough for me. He worked his ass off hard, worked his ass off. He just finished working at 80 years old. And if he could still go to work at 81 years old, this man would still be at work. But I thought my whole life seeing my dad get ripped off, not get the opportunities, not speaking up for what he should deserve, not being taken care of the way that other people in his company were getting taken care of. And he gave him everything.
Jeremy, let me ask you this. So we're trying to have more of a conversation. So for all of us, and I again encourage everybody, if you have questions or comments, write them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. But right, one of the things that's going around the web, of course, and sort of has also inspired me a while ago. Right, James Baldwin talks a little bit about what you just said. Right, where he says, right, it took me years of vomiting up all the filth I'd been taught about myself and half believed before I was able to walk the earth as though I had the right to be here. You just mentioned a little bit of that, sort of in that sense. What does that but what does that do to the soul, right? I'm a rabbi. Sort of like my my coin is spirituality, and I'm concerned, right, and heartbroken that the filth that we swallow, right, and the price that we pay on the worth of the individual, right? There is the brutality in the police and how people see you, but of course there's also that space that you start to believe yourself that you have no worth, right? That you're not like everybody else. That sort of, right, the dreams you have as a child, as an adult, kind of come crashing down.
I mean, like honestly, how many of you guys would go out and take penitentiary chances to get out of a system, right? How many of you guys are going to go sell misery to people in your community just because you think it's the only thing that's going to get you away from it? How many people are willing, like the gang things got misconstrued over years, but in the beginning, gangs were there to protect ourselves, just keep like-minded people in the community and protect us. And then it got skewed into what everything gets skewed with money. Once money is involved in a lot of these systems, like that's what you see. And that the place of healing though, man, I could speak on the place of healing. It was allowing the trauma to continue to be reenacted and people hugging me and telling me like, hey man, is this the way you want to still conduct yourself, right? I didn't learn it by putting myself in the hood and acting like a fucking asshole anymore, excuse my language. But it came from being able to put myself in a community after I realized like, man, I've spent a majority of my life in prison with these false beliefs and these false narrative that I have. This narrative that I am nothing, this narrative that I can be nothing, this narrative that, hey, I'm good at starting, but finishing never happens, so why the fuck start? And then that's the place, is like coming home and allowing to act out those traumas as I understand them, act out this broken narrative that has been established not only by the dysfunction in my family, but the dysfunction I felt in the world from not knowing where the hell I have to fit in. That chameleon part's not the only drug addict self, part of myself. That ism I carried a long time ago has always been narrowed down to race. I tell you, every time I'm hurt in a situation, my inner child says, hey, you're the black kid in this situation. Hey, they're not seeing you for what you're worth. You're the black kid in this situation. And I have to constantly remind myself through conditioning of loving myself that this is not true. My capabilities go beyond that. Today, I'm part of the solution. Today, I'm not going to sit here and hide no more. Today, I'm going to speak up. Today, I'm going to lose friends. Today, I'm going to make people uncomfortable. Because if you're not uncomfortable with this topic, then you probably shouldn't be sitting in this fucking room. Straight up. That's the truth. This is not a comfortable subject. It's not comfortable for my mom who's married to a black man. It's not uncomfortable for my wife who's married to a black man who has biracial children. And I talk about this all the time. One of my kids is lighter than the other, right? Now I got to tell them the monsters in the closet are real, and we don't know who they look like, because it's radical on both sides. It can be. And if we want allies, we have to be willing to let people speak up for us. And that's what I found here. I found people willing to do the work for me, to push me, to share my voice, to share what's been happening to me. It's not natural for you to grow up and think that you're going to lose your friends, right? It's not natural for you to grow up and think you're going to lose your friends to gang violence or police brutality. But this is the life I live. The first time I got my hands put on me by a police, who was 30 and I was 16 years old, it was a sheriff. He beat the shit out of me. He drove me 30 miles to a neighborhood where could have killed me. And then because they seen a young kid getting dropped off by the police in this neighborhood, they got me a cab back home. And I'm 16. Who am I supposed to believe who's here to protect me? And then the things I do know from like being an athlete and getting the privilege of being on the other side of town every once in a while, is those parts of town look very different than the parts of town I'm raised in, than the parts of town I'm currently raising my children in, out of trying to make the best that I can.
Do you think that it's I guess let me ask you this way. What do you think is the hope for this to get better? What do you think would be needed in order for things to get better?
I mean, I was watching a lot today, and like my feelings are the same, and like and I don't mean to be like pessimistic. I really don't. It's hard to look at this because my education is deep, and my education looking at the history of blacks and the plight of blacks or African Americans or colors in this country, it starts in the beginning. So how do we get away from a system? Now everyone's aware, right? The pieces are like small changes change policing. Does small changes change the hood, right? Does small changes give people more access to the health care they need? Does changing the police thing give people more resources to better healthy habits? Because again, like everything that hits this country seems to hit the black community harder. Why are more blacks dying of the coronavirus? Well, look where we live. Look at our opportunity. Most people, most are essential workers, not out of McDonald's being the thing we need right now. That's being the thing that we can find with records that some of us have. So, I mean, I would love to say that, like, I mean, of course it starts with police. Like, to me, it makes no sense that they have internal affairs. Like, how are policing police, right? And thinking that they're going to do a biased job when there's, I mean, I know lawyers that worked that work for Los Angeles, working for cops cops being willing to say something on other cops. And what happens is, like, they will get no one will come out there when they're in distress. This is out on the news tonight. Like, look it up. CBS 7 News tonight. Mr. Gage is talking on this. He's represented many officers. So if we're not changing the ways in which, I mean, I know out here in Los Angeles, after Lee Baca, they put in county supervision. But again, like, they were supposed to meet during this whole thing. We still haven't met with the new sheriff. So like, this is what I'm sick of with the black community. I'm sick of everyone, especially politicians, saying they're here for us. They get the black vote and don't do shit for the fucking community. So that part needs to stop, first off. Like, don't sell a narrative to make your life better, and you're not going to change the life of those people directly being impacted. Don't give false hope, because what happens when you give false hope and you re-traumatizing broken people, this place is going to burn. Because the sad part is sometimes, and this is a lot of the radical shit that I'm hearing, some want it all to burn. Let's rebuild. Because do we really get a good starting spot when we still, in the mission statement of America, and the 13th and the 14th and 15th with our bullshit amendments, but in the 13th Amendment, like, how are we, please, if someone correct me if I'm wrong, but who do you understand as slaves in America? Please, I want someone to answer. This isn't a rhetorical.
Jeremy, you're breaking up. I don't know if everybody else sees this.
Jay? He'll be back.
Back in, oh, here you are. So you broke up, Jeremy.
We lost you. Say
You
what
lost for a second. You were talking about the amendment.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was saying, like, the amendments were, they're bullshit, because again, like, what is, and 13 and my connection, I think it's all fucked up. I'm sorry.
Let me that's okay. Let me ask you this, and I guess sort of both for you and Ben, sort of like, what does an ally look for you? Like, you know, when we're talking about, what you're talking about, people sort of like helping you in terms of talking and creating different elements. Like, what does an ally look to you, right? If you could construct sort of like a plan of action for me, right, as a white, cisgendered, privileged person, which I am, what would I look for you? Because I think, at least for me, it's many times is like, I don't know. I mean, I can be, right, I'm not, as a lot of people say, like, I'm not a racist. But as I said sort of before, like, about being anti-racist, doing actively taking actions to be anti-racist is very different, right?
Well, I think,
go on, yeah, Ben.
I mean, I would just like to speak on that, just that it's my duty to be an ally, right? And what I feel an ally is it's not just acting one way when I'm around my Black friends, right? And saying the right things when I'm around my Black friends and behaving like that's it. It's when I'm surrounded by white people and I'm seeing racism and I'm hearing racism and calling it out and squashing it immediately, right? Pointing out where the injustice is, even when there aren't people in the room that really care about it, right? Because you get around a bunch of people and all of a sudden their lips get real loose. And I've seen it time and time again in my life. People act one way in front of certain groups and people act another way in front of other groups. And that's just the way it is. And they feel like they're abiding by some social contract. But the fact is fuck that. We do this all the time. 24/7.
I mean,
go ahead, Jay.
no, go. I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix this internet.
Oh, yeah. So this is our responsibility and my responsibility as a white Jewish person, that I stand up for communities that voices are trying to be muted actively and constantly finding ways to discredit people and saying, no, that's not how it is. That's what an ally is. And that's how I would expect somebody, if somebody was advocating for me, I would expect that, right? And that's what I look for, and that's how I try to behave.
And I mean, and again, there's different levels at this time, man. There really is different levels, because part of a marginalized community, the disadvantage does come to how we're going to get out. It looks like I might be broken up again. I cannot.
No, you're good.
Jeremy?
Jay, you're good. Headed to better.
Good. Okay, I'm just not picking. I'm not picking you guys up.
We can hear you now.
All right. No, but I think it's on different levels. It's on what you can do, right? Like, there's some people with platforms bigger than others, and there's some people that that just the first place, I will tell you, everyone, the first place any ally can start in this situation is education. Educate yourself on what Blacks have been going through in America, and start in the 1800s. Literally start in the 1800s. And then look at how laws have been enacted to supposedly help Black communities or change the reins and change the motion. And then we get to 1965. And literally less than 60 years ago, we still had separation in this country. So this will start to help everyone understand, like, this boiling, this rage, again, the trauma that is the world's experiencing in some places, but mostly it's peaceful. And again, I urge you to get, after you get some education, be willing to have a conversation with someone outside of your race. This is the only way this changes. If you're not willing to talk about whether you've been privileged or you've had disadvantages and what it means to have someone just listen to you and support you. This is how I'm a changed man. I'm literally 5 years out of prison. I have a family today. I've spent a majority of my life in and out of the oppressive system. I've been going in since I was a young adolescent. I've been on supervision literally damn near 18 years of my life, one way or another, from a juvenile to an adult. And it wasn't until people wanted to get to know and understand and let me act from the way that I knew, the way that this narrative built to protect me. Because I was going to manipulate, I wasn't going to get over, just so I didn't have to. I was worried about taking care of myself. And this is the problem. This is why racism still exists. Because we fail to realize that we live in an interdependent society. I can find meaning in the search of myself, but guess what? Like, I live next to white people. I live next to Black people. I live next to people in America. That's the thing that's made this country beautiful. We're supposed to be a melting pot, but we're not, man. We're not a melting pot. Again, the melting pot comes from the advantages of socioeconomic class. And if we're not willing to look at those separations, and it does come, like, it's not, I get upset even sometimes at the Black community. I really do. And I'm telling you, I'm stuck in the argument of both, because I don't see how one side's right or one side's wrong. I believe that more people need to listen, more people need to have conversations, more people need to understand each other. And if you have platforms as big as you do, and you're not using them to and not just, hey, I'm here. Like this, the center, what we do, we say, hey, I'm here, let's have a conversation about race. This is how you become an ally. This is how you support this movement. This is how you support what's going on. So they can no longer hide behind, oh, this is only happening to a few people. When they could hear every colored person's voice in America, they're gonna understand that, like, the disadvantages that all of us face. This is why some groups have it better than others, and I swear. Some people said, all right, we know our disadvantages. We're gonna stick together as a community no matter what, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. We don't have to be blind to it, right? Asian Americans do very well at it. Mexican Americans do very well at it, right? Keep the money in, right? Even look, like, Jews have separated themselves because you guys do good at staying within and also coexisting with others.
To an extent, right? I mean, that's one of my fears about this, and why I'm so invested in this conversation, is this, right? Sort of like, I'm the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, and I know that injustice and inequality is just a trickle down sort of trickle down pyramid. That if I don't speak up, right? So like Martin Niemöller, right? If I don't speak up for those who are disadvantaged, right? And I keep saying, like, oh, it doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect me, then eventually it will come to me, right? Eventually it will come to me when nobody can speak, because, right? I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Tomorrow, right, could lose my job, I could lose my house, I could lose my right, every privilege that I have could be lost. And if I don't create social spaces for justice for everybody, right, my kids, whoever, might suffer in the same way, right? So, like, for me, part of the problem is, I think, that we don't see that we're all connected somehow. That somehow this is, right, the black plight, whoever it is. And right, it's hard not to think, because right, Pride month
Right
is
now,
June, right? Um, and we celebrate Pride, right? 51 years of a riot that was started by queers and trans people of color. And right, and this is the commemoration. So now it's like, sort of like big parties on Fifth Avenue, but it didn't start this way. And I constantly think about this question, which is true for me and everybody else. Like, what would take me out of my house? What would make me stand up? Because there's so many causes that don't, right? If I'm honest, there's tons of causes that don't touch me in such a way, and I'm like, okay, no, maybe I'll write a check, right? I'll do the white thing, right? I'll write a check for the cause. But there's so much more that we have to do. But you're right, and I'm so concerned that people are just not having the conversation. People are afraid to have the conversation, right?
And it just reminds me that there's through these conversations, it just helps remind you that there's a human element to everyone, right? You take out what some people have called the norms and what some people have called the norms of privilege, and like still everyone's going through something. I don't care. Like, yes, there's certain disadvantages, there's other roadblocks for people. At the core of everything, every human being is going through something. And the part of me, and the part of like what I'm trying to restore back to humanity is seeing, like, even right now, man, look, what happened to George Floyd is a tragedy. But what happened in that man's house that allowed him to step on the back of another man and squeeze the life out of his another man, that is also a tragedy. And I'm not saying like in comparison, but imagine that this hatred is being taught inside of families, inside of systems that keep people oppressed, that could get you to the point where human life means nothing, right? And the police and the judicial system, they just got to do a better job, man. There's been proven, there's been research, there's been articles, the Stanford prison experiment, the Zimbardo effect. Like, let's be real. And these ain't research from people of color. Like, you got people researching that says what happens when you are placed in a position of authority over somebody. And if these people aren't getting the care they need, because being a cop has to be traumatizing as well. I know what I went through when I was putting myself in situations of life and death, seeing violence that a child shouldn't see. I know what it did to me. I know it took a lot of love to heal my soul. So if these guys are just doing what they're doing and going back to the good old boys club, like, this is an issue.
Let me ask you, both of you this, both you and Ben. So, right, we hear a lot of anger, we hear a lot of angst. How do you channel that, right? How do you channel the anger that you're feeling, the angst that you're feeling, right, given the state of the world, right? How do you channel it for change? Do you channel it for change? How do we do that?
Since the last week, the way I've been channeling my rage is through my tears, brother. Like, because there's so many parts of me that, like, the man I learned to integrate in a life of recovery, he wants to show his face. He wants to burn shit down. He wants to, but I know, man, I know in the core of my soul that no oppressive force can be beat with another force, and it has to come from a place of power. And the only thing that I know that destroys hate is love. And I'm willing to die for that today. I'm willing to die for love in this world, man. No, because I do. I've been in the worst places. I've been treated inhumanely like an animal. I've sat and spent many years behind bars in conditions that most people would be like, oh shit, like, you guys live like this? Yes. my wife still finds it weird that I find sometimes it more comfortable on the floor than in our bed together. Right? So, I mean, and I'll let Ben.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ben, how do you, as somebody who went through the system, but with a different attitude towards you, how do you channel that anger, the angst?
Yeah, I mean, sitting here and watching this, I mean, I've had a lot of bad experiences with police, even being a white Jewish kid. And, you know, the difference isn't kind of where my privilege comes in, is that 99% of those experiences were my fault. And once I encountered the police, I heightened it even further by being an asshole and running my mouth. And I got treated how I got treated because I wanted to tell them what time it was. But the thing is that sitting here and, you know, it's two sides of the coin. I'm in recovery, and I live a life that I live by spiritual principles, right? And that is love, and that's compassion, and that's understanding, and that's seeing things from someone else's perspective, even if it doesn't align with my beliefs. But sitting here in the house, watching the news, reading the stories, reading the articles, hearing the personal experiences, I get infuriated, and I feel rage inside of me, and I feel compelled to go out and destroy shit. And it's not that I feel that's the right thing to do. I know that it's not. I went to a protest yesterday, and we marched up, and there was a line of police there, and we all took a knee in front of the police. And out of 10 police officers, and we were asking them, we were peaceful, we asked them kindly, take a knee with us, right? Show us that you understand what has gone wrong here, and that you see that even though you are a police officer, you understand that this is wrong, that there is a system in place that is not working. And they refused to take the knee. Only 2 of those cops took the knee. And in that moment, I understood what it meant to want to throw a brick at somebody's head, right? And I didn't do that, but I felt compelled inside of me to hurt one of them. And the way that I've been dealing with this is that I have to constantly use these tools that I've learned, because I lived a long time not living with love, not living with compassion, not living with respect for myself or anybody else. And being in recovery, and being that is the foundation of what gets me through each day and what allows me to continue living this life and sustain this lifestyle, is that I channel it into my family, right? I channel it at home. I channel it into my wife. I channel it into my art. I've been able, in the last few days since this has started, to put out art that conveys a message of understanding and solidarity. I've been able to go to protests, being at Chuva Center, us getting active, us starting conversations. Doing things like this helps me release that rage and understand that this is not going to be healed by me screaming in a cop's face, right? Because he's going to look at me like an animal and crack my head open, and I'm going to be in jail. And that's going to be the end of that. And it's hard. It's hard because it's people like Jeremy. It's people like, it's when I see the injustice, when I know what it is, when I've been in jail with people that I remember one time I got thrown into a holding cell, and there was a guy across from me who literally did nothing, and he was beaten to a pulp by the police and literally was screaming at the top of his lungs through the whole night, would not stop screaming because he had just been thoroughly beaten for no reason and thrown into a jail cell. I was in there for perfectly good reasons. I should have been in that jail cell. This man across from me, I didn't know if he was guilty or not, but from the tone in his voice and how he was expressing himself, I just felt it. My instinct told me that he was in there for some bullshit. And so people, I hear it flying around today. Oh, now the 3 cops are locked up. The 3 extra cops have been arrested, so now this should all end, right? No.
Yeah.
That's what sparked this, right? That was the catalyst, right? But this is a much larger conversation. This is a huge conversation. We cannot stop speaking about this until we see real change. And it's very similar to recovery. We talk about recovery every day. we act in recovery every day because that's how we see the change in ourselves. The second we rest on our laurels and we think that things are healed, I'm back to shooting dope into my arm. And it's the same thing with this system. We can come out here, crowd the streets, burn every fucking building down, and then after a week, go home, and guess what? They're going to go right back to the same shit they were doing. And nothing's going to be different.
Yeah, and one way to help, man, one way to help and really be an ally is to go support. And it's not, I'm not talking on a federal level. How many of these sheriffs or police officers or career sheriffs or police commissioners, because no one's out there willing to speak? And guess what? Like the mayor and all them, they're in charge of police spending. So if you're not out there picking and choosing who you guys are putting or who we are putting in office, that's where this thing starts. They can demand where funding goes. They get paid through us. So this is a part too, is like, what am I willing to ally with, right? If I know this is wrong, am I going to speak up and give a vote and somebody that I think is going to do right for a marginalized community that we all, whether what, I don't care what side of town you live on, like you are going to interact with people like me if you live in this country. And I promise if you say hi back like I try to every stranger, like we could have a really dope conversation. And this is most conversations you would have with people if we started seeing people as people and not as what we do with these false lenses, which is our eyes, right? The second I see something, I already have an opinion about everyone's life that I even see through this screen. And I won't say one word to somebody. Or what else I would do is if Ben Litchman tells me this person's a piece of shit, I should not give this person a chance. No, this is not true. This is not true. We all have to create our own experiences with people. And the more you're willing to have conversations, the more you're willing to see an individual for not what they're worth, but the value of who they are. And the only way you can get to know that, the only way you get to know that is by asking someone how they're doing. What have you been through? You look really tired. Damn, man, this thing must be really affecting you. You know how many conversations I've been reaching out back and forth, but you know what I've been scared of? Again, my wife is white. Like in a time where LA is burning, we live in a community that can, this is the part. These are the conversations. It's like, babe, it's not about what you say. Sometimes it's just being able to listen, right?
Yeah,
sometimes,
I mean,
go ahead.
No, it's, it's funny, right? Because you, right? You guys are talking sort of like the change, right? And sort of out, right? And sort of me being me, right? I always say like, right? I can't change anybody. The only person I have control over is myself, right? It's sort of like I look inwards. For me, part of the conversation is not to say, right, I will change them. I will create like, right? I'm a little more cynical about those, but more importantly, I always go inwards and say like, what can I do? Right? We talking, the word privilege came up a few times, and in the time we have left, sort of like how, right? Part of my question for you and for myself and others, right, is how do I check my privilege? How do I do it on a daily basis, right? Talking about recovery, how do I check my privilege to make sure that my privilege is used for the good, right? That I can channel into positive things, right? Because fundamentally, right, as we said it, right, the right, Jane Elliott sort of in a conversation a long time ago said, right, if are you willing to be treated the same way as a black person is treated in America? And if the answer is not yes, then you know something is wrong.
Yeah,
right? And that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, I think the first thing is coming to terms with the fact that you are privileged, because a lot of people aren't able to accept that, and that's a burn to them, right? Because a lot of people feel like, oh, I have problems, I have struggles, I didn't come from the best family, I didn't, right? And the fact is that for me, for everything that I've been through in my life, the one thing that was never stacked against me was the color of my skin, and just that in itself is a privilege. Right? And the fact that I didn't have to worry just walking down the street that a police officer was going to run up on me just because of the way I looked. And so it's.
So what do we do today? Like, what do you do today to ask yourself, what am I doing with my privilege? Right? That question for all of us.
What you do is you can't stand idly, right? You can't say, oh, you know what, this is too much, I'm turning off the TV. Because guess what? For a black person, turning off the TV don't stop it. You can't say, oh, this is too much, I'm not going to the protest. Well, for a black person, it don't matter. They're either protesting or not. They have to deal with this shit on a daily basis. So today, what I can do is be a voice of truth, is be an advocate, is point out the systematic racism, is point out the injustices, is stand by, is have conversations, is do what we're doing, right? For me, that's how I can use my privilege to be a benefit. And Jeremy, if there's anything else that you feel I or any of us can do, please let us know.
I would say, right, it's interesting what you said, right, because I think about it as well, right? So like the ability to say, oh, I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to take a mental health hour or mental health, like many people, right, if like don't have that privilege, right? They can't turn it off. Everywhere they go, they're that. And for me, a lot of the questions with terms of privilege and checking myself is to put myself in that situation, to ask myself, what do I do when I feel I have no choices? How do I, right? How do I fight that? And to ask myself, can I create those choices for others? Right? And for sometimes it's with money and, and support. For some, it's with, writing or calling or protesting. But I think, and like Jeremy said it best, right? And that's the only way I know how to do it, is to talk to people around me and ask, tell me your story. Because I think we have a lot of friends and people in our life that we just don't know their story. We don't know the story of the people who are, right, so like the nurses, the people who are cleaning our homes, the people who are serving us food, the people who are really sort of not able to sort of tell their stories. And Jeremy said it best, that many times we ask somebody, hey, how are you? But we really don't expect an answer. And we really need to sort of stop and say, like, no, I want to know, you know? And that for me many times gives a lot of things. There's one of my favorite stories, right, in Talmud is about God's prayer. And the only way we know what God prays, his own prayer, is because he asked the layman. And the end of the story says, so that the blessing of a regular person be not light in your eyes. Because it's the regular people on the street, right, or the people around you, people who serve you, that have a story that we have to sort of look at it. And most of them, unfortunately, are people of color.
I think one of my favorite things that I've heard in just like the social justice realm, or just period of like countries, great countries or civilization, it's not how well the rich are doing, but it's how well we treat our prisoners. It's how we treat the criminals. It's what we're doing for people that hopefully we're seeing them as human beings in these situations, right? If we design laws and people break laws, they're punished, but punishment shouldn't be set disadvantages for people so they're constantly just less than variety, right? So that's a piece of this as well. It's really the how I would ask everyone to get real curious on individuals or places or people that bring up the idea of bad in their mind, right? Like, check yourself in that place. Like, what are the bad parts of town, and why am I considering it that way? Is it because is crime bad to me, or is people committing crime, or are drug addicts bad, or is it once they become full-blown addicts that's when they cross the threshold? That's the piece that I think can help a lot of people, is the more curiosity towards others outside of myself, staying with a sense of open-mindedness in this issue, in this topic, and examining yourself. Sit with yourself like most of America has been doing, with nothing but themselves to look at, and ask yourself, where have I been in this? Where have I not wanted to look? And it's okay, man. Like the truth is it's not about, oh shit, I haven't done enough, now I gotta go give my life to something that's like may not be it for you. I'm not asking for that. I don't want false hopes, false allies. I find what calling you can connect with in healing humanity. If it's Black Lives right now, please join. If it's another movement, please remember, like, at the core of this, man, like, race, color, all this other shit is pointless, man, because at the only race I understand us as is the human race, man. That's it. That's it. That's it. We all come from different backgrounds, different belief systems, and a lot of this is through our experiences, right? This is how you formulate your life, is through your experiences. So
Yeah.
That's my hope for everyone. Please educate yourself on all topics of interest, on movements of racism, of discrimination, I mean, look at women's rights, look into all of this, like, and then we can start seeing this picture that has been painted for the marginalized communities in this country, and then we can look at ourselves and really evaluate: do we live in the greatest country? And if we don't, what is my responsibility being in a democracy, being in the greatest country in the world? What is my responsibility to my fellow human beings?
That's thank you for that. That's a great way to end this. What I'm hearing, to recap, right? Educate yourself, go out to the street, understand where you're coming from, and connect to people is really the takeaway, is the call of actions that I hear, right? Get involved in social justice, whatever it is, even if it's not, Black Lives Matter or whatever, like find something that you care about. And lastly, which I like a lot, right, is our responsibility to this world, that if we want to make it, we have to look at ourselves and look at the world. Jeremy, thank you so much. Ben, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, we're the Tshuva Center. You can find us online at tshuvacenter.org, or, of course, on Instagram. We're going to do more conversations, more talking. Feel free to text us, email us. You can check out our website to ways to participate. We run groups every week. We also have our podcast, Tattoos and Torah. So we hope to see you online and engage with you guys. Feel free to send us a text or emails if you have any more questions for us or anybody else. Thank you again for joining us. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.